Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today I'm very honored to have a special guest on the channel. His name is Saswata Basu. Saswata, thank you very much for coming on the channel.
It's my pleasure, Brad.
And
Great to be
obviously,
here.
it's great that you are here. I really do mean that. And obviously, you represent a very exciting project, a very exciting, I guess, blockchain entity, and that is called 0Chain. So for those who are not familiar, we're going to look deep into that today. But before we do, let's find out a bit more about Saswata. He is the founder of 0Chain, which is pretty impressive in and of itself. But perhaps more importantly, he's backed with a lot of experience. He has 20 years experience as an entrepreneur. He's also a very experienced full-stack developer. And what is also very impressive about you, Saswata, you completed a PhD within 3 years, which not many people achieve. So that in itself is a significant feat. Congratulations. You also have a very strong background in blockchain, and you've also been involved in many pioneering technologies such as IoT, cloud, and the list goes on. So quite impressive.
Thank you, Brad. It's great that you mentioned my UCLA days. I did have to work very hard. I wasn't partying that much, so
Mm.
that's why I was able to complete both the thesis, master's thesis, and PhD dissertation. And
In
they were
three
both
years.
project oriented. Yeah, they were both project oriented, so they were going in parallel. So I'm used to doing things parallel with stuff, and that's what I've been doing all my life. So I try to fast track everything, and if you look at my earlier projects, I've basically fast tracked,
Right.
tried things in parallel. So
There's no
that's how
pun.
I was able to get 3 years. It wasn't magical.
Right, but
It
no,
wasn't
no,
like a
no,
sort of thing.
no pun intended, I suppose, with the parallelism of your approach, given that you represent a blockchain architecture that's trying to really spread out through its sidechains.
Yes. Yes. So actually, that's a nice segue to what we're trying to do. I tried to come up with a clean slate that would allow regular dApps, traditional apps to get on to the blockchain. How do I do that? I had an IoT project prior to starting Zero Chain, and the initial thinking was, how do I get the IoT to be on the blockchain? And that required sub-second finality, that required lower cost in terms of zero fees. So we started with zero low fees, and then I said, why not zero cost? And then subsequent to that, we kind of looked at how it can apply to other verticals, not just IoT, but let's say AI or image processing, that requires more time. So
Hmm.
different applications have different requirements, and that's the genesis of having parallel chains,
Right.
and
Let
be able to self-work. A lot of, if you look at the history behind the blockchains, they always forked from a blockchain, like Bitcoin. A lot of the altcoins basically forked from the Bitcoin, and then Ethereum came along and said, okay, all coins can be on the Ethereum platform. You don't have to fork anymore. But then the hard forking took place, and it's not a good thing because, size, a current blockchain is not sufficient for all applications,
right.
and that's why we said, why not self fork?
Right. Well, you've addressed some of the sort of perhaps motivations for your project. We're going to dive deeper into that later, but let's talk about the slogan. I like to address that pretty quickly so that the audience can understand. You argue that you are a zero-cost cloud for IoT, for web, enterprise, and for enterprise apps. You're essentially trying to be a dApp solution, and also attract and garner interest in that space. But let's talk about
Yes.
that more specifically. How exactly are you planning on being this zero-cost cloud provision?
So, by the way, the new slogan, I need to change. We're gonna update the website. So the
Okay.
new slogan is fast, flexible, free, or you can say fast, free, flexible. I don't know which order
Right.
comes first because all three are very important features.
Hmm.
So we want to build a fast cloud, a free cloud, and a flexible cloud. The flexible part is you can create your own chain,
Right.
and we want to cater to any blockchain, any existing blockchain, and we want to be an extensible platform for those blockchains, whether you're on Neo or Ethereum or EOS, or I'm sure there are other Stellar, for instance, another blockchain that's allowing
Hmm.
dApps to be creating a wallet on the blockchain. it doesn't matter where you are. If you're a dApp, we can create a chain for you. We can configure a chain for you that is suitable to your needs and can satisfy your condition. And your condition could be different conditions. You may want faster, or you may want longer compute time, or you may want more miners, or you may want a higher level of consensus. Let's say 50% majority is not enough. You want 80% consensus, like for a bank rate. If you're a bank application, you want that, then we'll give it to you.
Sure. Well, in that context, obviously, there's a lot of questions about competitors with regard to what you're trying to establish, but clearly you don't regard blockchains themselves as competitors, but more so as something of compatibility.
Yeah, so it's we don't want to compete with blockchains that are already out there or the newer blockchains. We're just trying to fill in the gaps. I think excuse me.
I hope you feel better. Also, just for the Saswata is actually isn't well at the moment, so he's done. That's a great privilege in coming on. So I do thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
So Saswata, essentially your project is a protocol by nature, and you are a clear architectural design. But can you tell us a bit more specifically about these 3 points? The superfast nature, particularly with regard to your sub-second finality, your infinite scalability, which I'm very interested, no doubt many of the viewers are, to find out more about how you are, and also your self-forking. So we can do that in steps. So let's talk about first your superfast nature and design.
Right. So the way we're achieving super fast speed is basically we took the proof of stake protocol, which is essentially these days is delegated proof of stake,
right,
and a Byzantine, which allows the finality to be deterministic instead of probabilistic, which is in the case of Ethereum and Bitcoin, and made it two-dimensional.
Yes.
By making it two-dimensional, we add a layer of security and speed. So what that means is if a block generator fails to produce a block, if a primary block generator fails to produce a block, secondary or tertiary block generator can produce a block. And after the block is generated, then you have multiple verifiers verifying that block, not just one miner. So that way you can verify it very quickly. So you collect signatures, and once the signatures are more than a quorum, then you can finalize at the end of that time slot. So basically you have 2 time slots, and the time slots are based on block time. So we chose 300 milliseconds because within 3 time slots we can do sub-second. Now you could choose lower time, you could choose higher time. It really depends on your need. And that's where we came up with self-forking, where different dApps have different needs, and so you could self-fork out of the main chain and create your own chain. You can experiment. You can be a researcher and experiment on a new chain. And so depending on the configuration, you can basically fork a chain and allow your currency. You can own that chain. You can have your application on that chain. Or you can create that chain and let others use it. It's all parallel chain. The chain doesn't basically get back to the main chain. It's all parallel chain. So that enables you to have infinite scalability. Otherwise, if everything goes back to the main chain, you will not have scalability, infinite scalability.
Sure.
So, and then of course, within the chain, we do parallel computing. So we want to have a lot of transactions per second within each chain. So, and that's something we're working on. So basically, I think that's what we talked about, scalability, and in terms of finality, scalability, and
yes, and also with regard to your self-forking. Yes. Yeah. So I think you answered that really well. Can we just go back again to your Byzantine delegated proof of stake? Why is it you decided to meld, I guess, the Byzantine element? No doubt you were mentioned before about the fast finality, but why did it need to be deterministic? Why was that such an crucial part, given that the underpinnings of the DPoS we know come from projects like EOS, for example? Why add a new flavor?
Because if you look at the traditional DPoS that EOS or I guess Larimer introduced, it's probabilistic. So it's based on the weight of the blocks, and that takes about 45 seconds. It depends on how many miners you have. I think they have 21 miners, and that takes like I think each block time is like 3 seconds, so it's 45 seconds before you finalize. Um, and I think recently I heard that he's adding the Byzantine condition too,
That's interesting.
to reduce snapping. Yeah. So I guess, otherwise you cannot, you want a Byzantine condition sort of like Stellar and Ripple so that you can have a quorum of signatures and be able to decide whether this block is in or whether the block is out. So you can have some deterministic finality. Otherwise, if you wait for the weight of the blocks, it's going to take some time before you can say, okay, 99.99% the block is in.
Right, and I noticed also in another interview you did recently, and recently did an interview where you, I guess, described your consensus algorithm as more of the 2D dash BPOS. So
BPOS.
Yeah, which is really interesting. If we could talk about, I suppose, your allusions to Ripple for a moment, because obviously it's known to be a permission design, and you're clearly not. So can we talk about that distinction between the permissionless and an open source nature that you represent, and those that perhaps aren't?
Right. So, Ripple, of course, is permissioned chain. Ours is going to be, it's up to you how you design your own chain. Obviously, you can make it permissioned, but our main chain is not going to be permissioned. And our consensus algorithm, we call it 2D-BPOS because it's two-dimensional. That adds a layer of security and speed, and B, because of Byzantine and the POS is delegated proof of stake. So that's, I guess, so we don't need a permission chain because of our consensus algorithm. It allows us not, doesn't have to be permissioned. You can add a layer of permission if you want to create your own chain, but we don't need permission miners to be on a network.
Sure. Well, let's go there for a moment.
Yeah, so we shuffle. Basically, what we'll do is that and this will become clear as we write a white paper dedicated to the miner protocol, the shuffling protocol, and the storage protocol. And there are a bunch of protocols we are doing, so we're going to write individual white papers on it, and proofs associated with it. So the shuffling part keeps the basically, you have an active set and you have an inactive set of miners, and you shuffle randomly the miners from the active set to the inactive set. And there's a shuffling period, and this happens on a regular basis.
Right.
And it's not deterministic, so you don't know whether you're going to get selected. Now, obviously, if you have a majority of the miners on the set, that are bad, then obviously the protocol fails. But that's true in all the cases if you have majority of the miners that are bad.
Yeah, which makes sense. Well, if we could talk about scalability for a moment here, and the reason obviously because it's the buzzword in many blockchain conversations, but certainly you elaborate quite a lot in your white paper about it. So why is scalability a problem generally that you see in blockchain, and why is your solution ideally better than most, if not better?
Right. So scalability, I would look at, so the way we're approaching scalability is twofold. One, we are creating a lot of transactions per second, and we haven't announced how many transactions. Obviously, a stretch goal is a lot of transactions per second, more than Visa and more some of the others that are talking about.
Okay, so sorry, can I just ask you, given that you mentioned Visa, it is important without trying to create FOMO, obviously, or hype. In comparison to current traditional markets, it seems that with the cloud design, you are up there already with your own capacity in terms of scalability. Well, currently, with regard to traditional markets, traditional cloud capability, traditional I'm talking about, from what I've read in your white paper is that your current capacities are equivalent to some of the traditional capacities of cloud infrastructures, and particularly with regard to scalability?
Yeah, so one of the things, so we are trying to achieve the traditional cloud. You could probably not achieve traditional cloud because one is centralized,
okay,
and one is decentralized, right? So you can't, but we're going to be close. So if you're saying, okay, you can complete a transaction within one time slot in a traditional cloud, centralized, here you need maybe 3 time slots. So it's 3x slower, but it's a pretty good deal still, because you get this decentralization out of it, right?
And that's just for now. That's not talking about in years ahead.
That's right. That's right. It's now. We can achieve that now, and that's what we're trying to do, right? With our main chain, that's our focus. We want to have almost traditional clouds performance,
right?
Which is as good as you can get. I mean, I don't think you can get better than what we're doing. This is like the edge. I think I think when we started out, we said, we're going to have the best platform out there for traditional clouds applications to move over. You cannot do better than that in terms of the architecture. Now, you could have a quantum computer down the road, and you can reduce the time of finality, reduce the time slot, but in terms of the architecture, it remains the same.
Okay. I think that's a great point. Well, if we could talk also about how you're addressing energy waste, because obviously that's an issue that was broached right from the original genesis of blockchain. So how is that being redressed in your design?
So we're basically creating a very efficient. Our consensus protocol is efficient because you have M by N miners deciding on consensus, and you can choose that depending on what you would like. No. So if you want, if you're a bank grade chain, you might require higher decentralization, and so you may have more miners, but in terms of the energy waste, it's a little. But if you're image processing, you're gonna have a lot of computing power requirement. So maybe you will choose a smaller set. Maybe it's gonna be 3 by 3 instead of 20 by 20 miners. Right. So I guess the point is that you can tailor your chain to a specific application and not have an energy waste as opposed to what's there today, which is all the computers doing computing, and that's not scalable. Right. That's a total energy waste. And there is proof of work, which you're just solving a cryptographic puzzle, which doesn't add to anything except security.
Sure. Well, if we could talk a little bit more about that multi-dimensional design that you're broaching by having those side chains. There's a mention in your white paper of an n-dimensional design. So, why is that relevant? What is the purpose of the n-dimensional aspect?
Yeah, so what I meant was n-dimensional is that, okay, let's kind of create different dimensions. You can have multiple chains that you can consider that as multiple dimensions. And within this chain, you have multiple miners, which is an m by n set. And then the miners doesn't have to do all the job. Let's divide the miner job into miners mining the block, and you have sharders storing the block, and you have blobbers storing unstructured data like images, videos, and audio files. Right. That way, it's efficient because now you don't have to buy, a 24-core machine with lots of GB of RAM, with lots of terabytes of storage. It doesn't make sense. Now you can divide up the work into sharders, and even then, even chains can be divided up. So, for instance, IoT data. If you want data, just storage of data, you don't need a sharder with a lot of RAM. You just need an SSD is fine, right? But if you want a code chain, like our main chain will be a code chain, so we'll have smart contracts within it. You want to preserve the states. You want to have states, then you need high RAM for that, for those sharders. Right. So it allows. If I'm a miner, then I know what my cost basis is, and I can then have a lower bit price. than I would if I'm doing everything.
I see.
And so the token payout, now this all feeds into the inflation protocol because the token payout then basically becomes lower, right? You're paying less amount of tokens, but the miners are still happy. It's a win-win situation for investors and or basically token buyers and miners who wants to get paid by tokens but want to be profitable.
Sure.
So.
And it's clear that you're also allowing the miner to really focus on one specific component of your design. And what's also interesting is you offer both a renting and a purchasing, opportunity for miners. There's the dual option.
Yeah, so I think we'll start out with rent option. I mean, rent option obviously will be available, but miners, I think, eventually will go toward buy option because it's going to be a lot more profitable for them.
Of course. Well,
and yeah,
I think they must be excited, no doubt, that there is that mining component because that generates certain profitability for them. What about sharding? Let's talk about that for a moment. That's a huge part of your design. Why is sharding so important to the overall, success of your architecture?
Because that way. The sharding basically is, by the way, the sharding concept is different from what Ethereum is talking about. So Ethereum sharding is you're sharding consensus because you're dividing up the computers into different blocks, right?
Right.
And well, that's not what we're doing. That's decoupled. So consensus is decoupled from storing of the blocks. So sharders just store the blocks,
right?
And that way it's basically less expensive. And the miners have less work to do. They just need to mine blocks, and then the sharders sync up with the miners to know which one is the last block created.
Right.
So it's kind of a divide and conquer mechanism.
So basically, it also addresses some of the, I guess, the computational space pressures and also memory pressures on a typical blockchain. You're addressing them both. Let's talk about bandwidth for a moment, Saswata, as well, because that's really key in what you're planning on doing. If we could talk about, again, how you're trying to improve bandwidth
one of the things we're
requirements.
doing is that, so what we're doing is basically we're gonna partner with a colo where these colos, so this is enterprise grade. We cannot have anybody put out a computer and be able to serve a dApp. So we want colos. We will partner with colos where there will be dark fiber connected between the colos, have very high bandwidth connectivity between the colos, and all the miners have to do is basically kind of click and buy from the colo website, for instance, in terms of infrastructure. So we'll give them a template, and then all the miners need to do is just click and buy and say, okay, I'm going to auto scale, and then we will figure it out. The protocol, so basically the miner selection protocol, the miner allocation protocol will figure things out.
Right. Well, what about in terms of your dual forked nature right from the outset with your main chain itself? You've decided to apply a dual forked approach entirely. So why have you done that? What's the main reason for that with regard to stateless and statefulness? Statelessness, I should say.
Yes. So because, for instance, so the purpose of a stateful and stateless chain, so we'll have those two chains from the genesis. IoT data doesn't need states or for instance storage data. Like if I want to store images, I just store a hash content.
Right.
I don't need to keep the state, and therefore I don't need RAM. And so that infrastructure is going to be a lot cheaper than an infrastructure, a sharder that needs to store the states, because that wouldn't require a lot of RAM and that's expensive. So they will have different pricing. It's all about efficiency. We're trying to extract as much efficiency out of it so that we can achieve 1% inflation. Most of the protocols out there, they start out with 100%, 200% inflation. Then they go down to like 5%. If they achieve 5%, oh, it's great,
Absolutely.
But you want to do like 1% from the get-go. So that's kind of hard to achieve if you don't have the infrastructure set up, the payout basically the token payout to be efficient. So that's where the basically the miners, sharders, and blobbers come in, as opposed to having just one entity.
Right. Well, if we could talk also about the model view controller component, or the MVC. And the reason why I ask you this is because you made it really clear in your white paper that that is actually fundamental to trying to, align with enterprise in terms of conforming with the requisites for attracting sort of enterprise into the space. So why is that so important to you that you do so?
Right. So the MVC architecture is something we kind of adopted during, when we develop enterprise apps, because you have a model, which is essentially data. So you could store the data on the data chain, and a view is, of course, the UI portion. So you're basically querying the data. So in our case, when you query the data, you're basically querying the shards, as opposed to querying the miners. In Ethereum, we're querying the miners. Now that's extra work. Why do you want it to do extra work? So that's the model view approach, and then the controller is where all these contracts are kept in the EVM machine, in a virtual machine where it's going to execute those contracts. And having these three separated, now as a enterprise app, I can deploy contracts on different chains and be able to kind of sort all of this thing out and have a more efficient system.
I see. And obviously, you
be able to conform to the architecture that they're already familiar with, because the MVC architecture allows also easier way to code and easier way to find, to develop, easier way to debug. So there are a lot of good things about that architecture, and this is a way to kind of be able to have that same architectural design.
Absolutely, and I think it's underestimated perhaps just how valuable it is to enterprise. But if we could talk about your team, again, perhaps another aspect of being undervalued here. I had a look at the credentials, but I wanted to ask you more directly, without going into individual team members, what's the key assets that your team do bring to the table when it comes to this kind of parallel architectural approach?
Yeah, so so first of all, we have a team of protocols who are very good in protocols. That's our professor and his students, Ken, Neha, and Gautam is, and we also have researchers now. We haven't actually announced the researchers yet, but there are researchers working with us.
Okay.
And then we have a parallel architecture team. Gautam is the engineering lead and co-founder of 0Chain, and he has years of experience working with major companies doing a production code, which is a high performance parallel computing design.
I see.
And he would be able to achieve the transactions per second that we would like.
Right.
And this is at the cutting edge, and he does cutting edge technology. He has been doing it for the last 8 years. So I'm confident that we'll be able to get the transactions per second.
Right. And just in terms of
you're asking,
just in terms of the team as well, Saswata, how many are in your team when you factor in those we don't know about on the website?
Probably around 12.
Okay.
12, probably 13, 12, 13, and then, probably add a couple more. So,
okay.
But we want to keep it small because we have a very tight schedule, and sometimes, adding more doesn't necessarily help.
Sure, I think that's a good point. Let's talk about that in the context, though, of other areas perhaps that may need some more, may need addressing, and that's the areas of marketing and PR, that sort of area. Because clearly you're dev heavy, you're engineering heavy.
Yes.
So what's being done about that aspect?
So, right now Atif is managing the PR, marketing, and everything. And we have hired, right now we're going on marketing. Basically, we're now, I'm going on an Asia trip. I'm going to be speaking at these events. And so we're generating enough interest. And our approach is to basically market to high value investors and to dApps. And the dApps, once the partner, they will actually, market our chain because they want to market our chain because they have a differentiating element.
Sure.
Because they can go to market faster. So we don't necessarily have to have a huge team to market to the community. We want to market to community that can appreciate our value, and then that will generate interest on its own. And these are the investors that are long-term investors or
Sure.
token buyers.
So just to recap, so essentially the grassroots initiatives or the grassroots marketing is happening organically,
Yes.
but you're really focused on spending the time and energy and arguably money on the enterprise components to really attract and garner interest. But let's talk about that a bit more. Let's talk about how successful you've been in attracting dApps into your ecosystem.
Right. So we'll be announcing partnerships on a regular basis for the next few weeks, including a blockchain partnership. So we're hoping that that will take us to the next level. So that's our strategy. So we will announce, and right now that's what we're focused on, basically having partnerships and working with them to solve their issues, and they will be marketing it for us.
I see. So when you talk about blockchain, you're talking about one that has its own dApp platform, no doubt, as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's going to strengthen and consolidate your own position.
Yes.
That's
our goal, to help that blockchain platform, be a partner to their dApp. To the dApps that are on their platform.
I'm excited to hear about that title. Obviously, you can't disclose yet, but we'll look for it. Let's talk about prototypes, demos, anything that's released yet as well for the public to access and become more familiar with.
Sure. So we thought about releasing something in March, but I think what we'll do is, because every time we if we were to release a demo or something, we're not going to disclose the code anyway. So we thought, let's focus on the testnet, which is closing up very fast, right? We're thinking of May delivery, and there will be a workshop at the end of the May. So we're right now focused on delivering on the testnet, and then everybody can try it out, and instead of giving it in pieces. So we were thinking of doing a demo in pieces. But it will basically, and since we are a small team, we're thinking that may not be a good idea, because we won't be able to do the real thing, which is the testnet for dApps to try out. And they are the key. They're our customers. Our customers are essentially dApps.
Right.
So,
but also,
what's holding tokens.
But also, given that, Saswata, no doubt hacking is a concern with regard to your own code base, your own code design. Is that one of the reasons why you like to, release it in one release point later on, so that protect your own interests?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the whole idea of not sharing the code on GitHub is because we don't want people to copy our source code and protocols, and we're still in an early phase. Yes, we have some IP protection, but we don't know how easy it is to protect our IP with just patents. So we want to have some protection before we go live.
Right.
So that's the intent.
So you are patent protected as well?
Yes.
Okay, which I think is an important thing.
And there will be patents that we can show people that we will have. We'll publish them. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, if we could move across now to your token. Obviously that's a huge issue of concern for many, or it's a point that many people want to understand better. There's 3 points you mentioned in your white paper. That is your fair pricing, your efficient infrastructure, and your free cloud design. So essentially it's the FEF of the core components. So let's firstly talk about your fair price. With regard to the sharders and the blobbers as well, why is this a fair price mining system?
As I mentioned earlier, if they can offer better bids. So if I'm a sharder and I know the cost of my infrastructure, I can offer a better bid than if I were to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we kind of divide up the job of mining into miners, sharders, and blobbers. Second thing is that we wanted to also peg it to the fiat price
Okay.
as opposed to giving tokens out on a regular basis, which is what Ethereum and Bitcoin does. So it'll be fair priced in that sense that this is the current fiat price, and if you offer certain storage, it'll be $1 per GB, which will be converted into tokens.
I see. So that's quite
So
stable.
yeah, that's quite stable, and also that helps miners. They know they're guaranteed this much percentage. It's not going up and down, and also it helps the token buyers because you have less inflation.
I see. So there's no issues with tether or something like that in this respect. You know, you're actually pegged to an actual fiat. What about with regard to the RAM, CPU, SSDs in terms of your efficient infrastructure?
So yeah, so the efficient infrastructure, it allows you to for instance, as I mentioned, the miners, if you have a mining equipment that has a lot of RAM, right, then you will bid higher price for it. And you can use it for a chain that is stateful. Now, if you're a miner that is mining an IoT chain, which is just a data chain, then you may have a mining equipment that has less RAM, which is going to be cheaper, so we can offer a cheaper bid price, and so forth. So it allows you to basically lower your bid price and stay competitive with other miners and participate in the network, but at the same time have a profit margin that is acceptable to you as a business person.
I see. And then if we move down to, I guess, you know, an equivalent of a banking aspect with regard to your free cloud in terms of, you know, your dApps having, you know, essentially a feeless design, your zero cost. So the free cloud, let's talk about that. How can you possibly be free?
That's a good question. Well, you go to a bank, and they offer you free services, a bunch of
But they never do.
stuff.
We know they never do. So are you really free?
Well, it's your cost becomes an asset.
Right.
So the way it's free is that the way we are saying it's free is that whatever you pay today on AWS, that is an asset. So let's say you pay, I don't know, $10,000 for some storage.
Okay.
So that becomes an asset on our network, and you are guaranteed the same amount of storage, regardless of the price. So that's how we do it now. In the background, what we're doing is basically we have a protocol, inflation protocol, that basically looks at the price of the token and the inflation rate, and if it's hitting the 1% inflation rate, then it starts controlling, sort of like the Fed Reserve. So, but more efficient, because Fed Reserve, it doesn't do it automatically. This is a self-healing kind of a scheme where you basically control the amount of tokens you're giving out, which the way you control it is you select the miners that are lower bids.
Okay.
So normally, by default, the miners are selected based on reputation. But if you're hitting the inflation ceiling, then you're going to select miners that are lower bid price.
Right.
So that's one. And then there are other variables, like you can lengthen the time the miners has to hold the deposit, or lengthen the time the dApps have to hold their tokens in order to use the network.
Right.
So there are other control variables that basically kick in depending on where you are in the inflation.
Okay. So obviously the lower price entry points are going to be key. But if we could talk about the token distribution as well, because it's not, you know, it's pretty straightforward. You've got 400 million tokens in total, and you've got allocations for different, you know, use cases or purposes, let's say. So let's talk about that really briefly. You've got 30%, is that right, for team, advisors, original investors in total?
Yes.
So why have you done it that way? Why have you included all those different people in that one group?
Oh, actually, so because we have seed investor, which
Mm-hmm.
holds a large chunk,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have advisors. We don't know how many advisors we'll have over the course of time,
Mm.
and
And
but
just to add to that, you do have some impressive ones. You have Roger Lim in there, and I think Ken as
yes,
well. I think
yes.
it's
Oh,
quite
thank you.
impressive.
Yeah. We try for the best. So, because well, the other thing is that it's an attractive project, so a lot of
Mm.
people want to be on our advisor list, and we just happen to choose the four that we have now, right?
Sure.
So yeah, I think where was I
So you got
actually?
sorry. So you got the 30%, and you're including your
Yes,
advisors in that.
that's right. Yeah, so 30%. So you have seed investor advisors and potential. We have contractors, so we didn't want to exclude. So we have team members, and then we have contractors that we want, and potential ecosystem that we want to incentivize. So those are all in that bucket, and we didn't want to segment them out because we don't know
Right.
what's going to happen. Because they're not allocated yet.
Right. Well, fundamentally, you are an ERC20 token initially, and you plan on
Yes.
becoming your own when the mainnet arrives later in the year. I suspect you'll transition into your own token.
Right. Right.
But for the moment, I did want to also broach with you with the crowd sale element or the event, let's say, because you're not doing an ICO, are you?
No. So we hit the hard cap at the 10% release, which is about 40 million tokens,
Mm.
and the other 10% we're reserving for. It's going to be locked for 2 years, and then 2 to 4 years.
Right.
It's going to be locked. So yeah, we reached the hard cap very quickly. In fact, as we launched the website at December 16th, and February 16th is when we reached the hard cap. So it was pretty fast.
Mm.
Our first event, our first public appearance was on January 15th or 16th, I believe, at the WCF, and then that's when things started to snowball. And we could have closed at the end of January. Actually, we kind of paused our pre-sale and wanted the public, the crowd involved in some sense. So we did a public pre-sale for those early guys who joined us, who subscribed on our site. So we basically paused it for a little bit. Otherwise, we could have closed end of January, and it could have been we could have had 2 or 3x more. In terms of, that's why we locked 10% out. So because we don't want to release all of our tokens.
Sure, you don't want to flood the market, but obviously it's bittersweet for those who are not yet invested and are considering it, because it's only 10% accessible within these events that come. So when can we expect these kinds of events? Will they be known well and truly in advance?
Yeah, so I'm going actually on a 4 event tour. I guess so I'll be speaking at Token Sky, and then there's a new event, and then there is Shenzhen. There's a conference, and then there will be one in Hong Kong where we're just attending, but we're also a silver sponsor there. So we'll be meeting people there.
So just to clarify,
3 events.
Sure, sorry to interrupt, but these are events you're attending. But what I'm referring to is events when you plan on releasing some of the, some sort of event, token event rather. Because obviously, you see, when will people know of these token events that happen, and also airdrops?
Right. So airdrops will happen probably August when the 180-day period is over, because we're releasing the tokens. So the ERC20 tokens will be released, I think in 2 weeks' time, probably 2 to 3 weeks, because it takes a while to write the smart contract and then get it. Actually, it takes a lot longer to get it audited, and it's a kind of a long, expensive process. So, but the timing would be based on February 16th. So from February 16th onwards, we're going to count the days, and then when the tokens are released, they get released that percentage, whatever that percentage is, maybe 20%, 30%, I don't know.
I see.
And then the rest of it will be released over 180 days, or the rest of the days from February 16th to August 15th, on a daily basis.
I see. Well, that's pretty clear. And obviously, want to reiterate, you're not having your ICO, which is, can I just ask you though, why did you decide not to do that? What was the reasoning? Because obviously ICOs are very popular. Sorry, I think you're back. You froze for a moment. So what was the reasoning for not doing an ICO, Saswata?
Yeah.
What was the main reason you chose?
Was the reason because there are two reasons. One, we didn't need to. A lot of people, want to create a lot of hype and marketing to get to the ICO point and be able to sell out and create a buzz and hype. We didn't think that that's the way we want to go. We are more B2B, so our value is really with other dApps. We want to be enterprise dApps. We want to stand for something that's like concrete and real. We don't necessarily want to create a hype and all of that. So that's one. And second, we have a very tight deadline,
right?
In terms of trying to achieve a testnet in record time. I don't think, if you look at the history of all the infrastructure projects, I don't think anybody did promise a testnet or mainnet this fast. And so we weighed those options, and we thought, we wanna, since we're getting oversubscribed, why not close it early and be able to deliver on time?
Right. So essentially, you're just a very confident team. You know that you're a B2B, you've got a serious product, and you want to focus on the business side of it. So we get that.
Yes.
But if we could talk about now the actual competitors for you, because you've mentioned that blockchains are not your competitor, but there must be, competitors in the space that are doing something similar to you. So are you concerned at all about other entries in the blockchain game or entries?
No, actually we're not. I think we. I don't know. There is obviously EOS. There is Cardano. There's obviously EOS, Cardano, Definity. There will be other blockchains, 0Chain. I don't know. So that's fine. These are all. I would say these are all. I think they create.
They're all scaling solutions, no doubt. But the question I want to pose is there space in the enterprise market for all of you? Because that's the key question on every investor's mind.
Right. I think the enterprise market is huge. So actually, we would prefer all these changes to educate enterprise customers, because it's not easy for just one guy to do it.
Right.
So actually, it's good that there's competition, because or competitive element. We are actually not competing completely, because if you look at EOS, they have a kind of a full system. So does Cardano, so does Definity, but they will all have each niche. Our niche is that we can create a blockchain for a dApp, customized blockchain that nobody does.
Right.
Second, we can guarantee a fast storage that nobody does. We haven't seen any. Those two elements are clear separation. Third is our sub-second finality. I don't think anybody can match our finality, because our 2D scheme. So, and the layer of security associated with it. So I think, our differentiation is there. Now, not everybody needs the best out there. So they will, they can go to EOS, they can go to Definity, there's still a better solution than what is there today, which is Ethereum.
Right. So essentially, you're all providing opportunities for improved architectures for the enterprise market, and obviously improving performance overall. What are some of the challenges you've found? Obviously, you're in pole position for your particular product and process and project rather. So what are some of the challenges you've faced already, particularly given the climate right now, 2018?
The main, I guess, the challenges is, typical startup challenge. There's so much work to do, and very few people to do it. It's just prioritizing. And as I said, a lot of people want a lot of things. A lot of people want marketing, hype, and all of that. and we're just doing just enough on both ends. But our focus is still on delivering, and that's what we are focused on. But it's easy to get defocused by all these other.
Absolutely. Well,
stories.
let's focus on the positive for a moment. What's one or two things that really excite you beyond your mainnet release, which is exciting in itself? But what's some things that really drive your team for the next year, let's say?
It's actually working with dApps and as I said, blockchain that really understand the value that we're bringing. I think it's exciting for them. It's exciting that we want to bring them that value. So that is what's driving us, so that we can help them out and fully realize their potential. Now, dApps do not have to spend time or money on infrastructure. They can now work on their protocols and they can have their own chain, just like what they would like to have in the first place, right?
Right.
And so they don't have to worry about the blockchain part. So I think it's exciting for them. It's a faster go-to-market. It's a good story for them that they can have a totally decentralized application. So that's exciting for us because they appreciate what we're doing.
Absolutely. So clearly, if you're out there and you have got a dApp and you're considering a platform, what Saswata is saying is look in the direction of 0Chain. They've got an offering of a zero cost, slogan,
Yes.
and they have new slogans coming out. But on behalf of all those who wanted to know about 0Chain, Saswata Basu, I appreciate your time, especially considering you haven't been well. It's been a privilege to learn more about you. It's an exciting project, no question, and you definitely clearly have a unique design that really isn't like anything else out there, in and of itself. So thank you very much for educating us, and we look forward to seeing more about it. Is there anything you'd like to finally add?
The one thing well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show.
No
and
problem.
I think you have asked wonderful questions, beautiful questions.
No problem.
That really go into the depth of our architecture, our design, our thinking behind it. And one thing I want to add is that unlike other tokens, we have an intrinsic layer of value, which is the data value that other tokens do not have. So if you're holding tokens, let's say if you're holding tokens, you actually can use those tokens to upload your images as an individual. Obviously, businesses will want to use the tokens, and for their business needs, for the storage needs, they're not going to be disposing of their tokens like what they're doing now in the marketplace. So I think our token has an intrinsic value of data, which kind of creates a buffer that prevents that's a layer of value that's hard to dispose of.
Right.
And you can think of them as circuit breakers or to that extent. So other than the monetary value, the asset value, there is the value of data.
That's fantastic. Well, obviously, it's an exciting project. You've got a great team that you're leading. We wish you all the very best in 2018, 19, 20, and the years to come. What's exciting, you are a long-term project. You aren't, that short-term hype. You are a long-term quality design, and we wish you truly all the very best as you evolve into an exciting utility-based project and business.
Thank you very much, Brad. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.